David Carson walked into his bedroom and saw two people engaged sex. One of the participants was his wife, Tori. It took him 30 seconds to realize that the other was Joe Benetti. David did not linger after identifying his wife's lover, nor did he experience the reactions he had heard might occur if he caught his wife with another man. He took a photo, then turned around, went downstairs, and poured himself a triple Jack Daniels in his favorite glass. He will make sure that this glass remains with him during the divorce. It is irreplaceable. David now understood why his wife didn't answer the phone when he called to say she was returning early from a business trip. David saw her phone on the table in the living room with a bunch of clothes lying around it. What a banality it is to come home early and find your wife in bed with another man. The most unpleasant thing is that she cheated with this arrogant chatterbox Benetti. Joe was the younger brother of one of the local sanctified people, and although the mafia would never let Joe into the inner or even outer circle, he still had some authority thanks to his brother, and Joe made sure everyone knew it. David drank whiskey while he searched the refrigerator for something to eat. Day was tense, and his last reception food consisted of a cup of yogurt for breakfast at the Marriott Fairfield this morning. He found a bag of chicken. Joe and Tori were probably having dinner at Hunter's Lounge before returning for their dessert. Anyone uninitiated might wonder why David was so indifferent to his wife's infidelity, but the fact is that David knew that Tori was a lover even before their wedding 3 years ago. She told him she had changed, and David had had no reason to doubt her fidelity until that evening, so maybe people really can't change. Another fact is that David was tired of all the drama surrounding his marriage to Tori. This woman could get turned on over the slightest little thing, and David had recently been thinking about divorce. At least now he had a good reason and could leave with a clear conscience and perhaps most of his property. David finished his cold chicken and drank his second triple whiskey, almost ready to leave when Tori went into the kitchen and started screaming. "David, what the hell? What are you doing here? Live here." At that moment, Joe burst into the room. He was completely naked and holding the lamp from David's bedside table in his hand. When he saw David, he stopped. "Dave, what are you doing here? Live here." Joe had always had the mind of a third grader, and he apparently mistook David's calm response for fear. "Well, cuckold, get out of here before I hurt you. Your old lady and I have unfinished business." Joe waved the lamp over his head, shouting a warning. David decided that he was pretty tired of it. On the kitchen table lay an expensive set of knives that their aunt and uncle had given them as a wedding gift. Under the influence of whiskey foggy his mind, David considered his options. Having never done anything like this before, he chose a long carving knife, last used when they hosted his relatives for Thanksgiving. Not one of the three people in the room realized what had happened until it was all over. Seriousness, the incident sobered David up. He looked at Joe, then at his wife. David knew he had just signed his own death warrant. Joe's brother John will kill him for this, and David knew that this murder would not be quick and painless. John Benetti has a reputation to uphold, and David will be another example of how no one messes with Benetti. He looked at his wife lying unconscious on the floor next to the dead man. He wanted to scream, "Damn it, Tori, why did you sleep with Benetti?" Now, more or less sober, David was considering his further actions. He went into his office to turn on the computer. Are there limits to the information available on the internet? David opened Bing. Someone at work once said that Google was tracking all searches, and whether that information was true or not, the last thing he wanted was someone tracking his searches tonight. He typed in "how to disappear." Many articles appeared, which he studied, taking extensive notes. Other queries provided more information. By 4 in the morning, he had a plan. He lay down on the bed in the guest room and took a nap for a few hours. When David woke up at 8, he untied Tori and let her go to the toilet. He briefly considered asking her why, but decided that she would simply take the opportunity to blame him or come up with some other pathetic excuse. He tied her up on the bed again and whispered in her ear, "Just sit still for a while. I'm sorry, but I'm not going to die because you decided to sleep with some asshole. I'll call someone tomorrow and tell them where you are. You'll have 24 hours of inconvenience, and I'll spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder. Goodbye." David looked at this woman one last time. Later, he would try to understand what made him marry her. How could he be so stupid? Now he was more concerned with the list of things that needed to be completed before becoming a shadow. At the top of the list were the steps necessary to secure the largest amount of money from his various sources and get those funds out of the country without being detained by the authorities. Cash advances on credit cards, getting money from investments, using home equity. Would such activity raise alarm bells? Not if you do it right, according to its online resources. By 1 o'clock in the afternoon, David had $100,000 and a first-class ticket to Rome. From Rome, he will take advantage of the new European Union rules and disappear into one of the small semi-autonomous regions where foreigners are loosely regulated. Karen Rowland sat at her desk, trying to find a way to tell a client without completely ruining her that the client's husband was sleeping with his secretary. From previous conversations, Karen knew that the client loved her husband. It's just a pity that she is married to a bastard. Karen was focused on her computer when she heard the door in her office open. Her assistant was at lunch and again did not lock the outside door. Karen glanced at the prosthetic leg standing in the corner. The prosthesis again caused her discomfort and required another adjustment. Karen wondered if she would be able to get it onto the stump of her knee in time. Bad luck. The door to her office opened immediately after she heard a man's voice. "Hello?" The man looked through the door. He wasn't that bad of a guy, more of a Southern European. He smiled, but there was something ostentatious in that smile when he spoke. "The door was open. May I disturb you? I need to find a person." Karen saved her work on the computer and invited the stranger to enter. Without getting up, she extended her hand to him and introduced herself. "Karen Rowland, how can I help you?" The stranger took her hand and held it a little longer than necessary. Was this an attempt to seduce or intimidate her? "My name is John Benetti. My sister, Tori Carson, is trying to find her estranged husband. He almost completely emptied their accounts and left the country. We know he flew to Rome last year. She believes that he should know that he has a child. Personally, I think it's better for her to raise the child herself, but how can you argue with the mother? We hired 2 different agencies in the last year and both failed. I learned your name through a friend. Basically, she keeps asking me to help find him, and I try. His name is David Carson." John Benetti's story didn't set off any immediate alarm bells. She told him about the difficulties of tracking someone in Europe, but that it was not impossible. She had the contacts and resources to do it. She also discussed fees and estimated costs. Benetti didn't bat an eyelid at all of this. "Can I meet your sister?" "Of course, I can bring her here today or tomorrow." "What time?" "If you can come tomorrow morning at 9 with Mrs. Spears Carson, I will prepare the contracts for signing. She will need to answer a few questions to obtain information." Benetti left. It's strange, he must have noticed her leg in the corner, but he didn't react to it. Karen did not attach any more importance to this and returned to the report for her client. The next morning at 9, John Benetti returned to the private investigator's office with Mrs. Tori Carson. Karen immediately noticed 2 things. Mrs. Spears Carson had once been hit hard in the nose, and Mrs. Carson looked scared. Perhaps she was a battered wife? Why do these women always want to return to their tyrant husband? Don't they realize how much better it would be not to worry about beatings? Karen asked questions. Has your husband been to Europe before? Where and when? What city or region did he particularly like? Did he know any foreign languages? And so on. Mrs. Spears Carson answered these and other questions quite well. But as the 3 of them talked, Karen reconsidered her initial suspicions. Mrs. Spears Carson was not afraid of her husband. She was afraid of her brother, John Benetti. Karen seriously considered turning down the assignment, but she needed the money and, despite her best intentions, she gave Mrs. Carson the contract to sign. Karen's husband, Bill, was in the hospital fighting for his life. How could a 35-year-old man who had never been sick in his life get cancer? Although Bill had good insurance and his company paid half his salary during his struggle to survive, The Rowland family struggled financially. Karen needed this assignment to pay the bills. The contract was signed and John Benetti wrote a check for the advance payment. Karen wanted to check information on Benetti and Carson, but she would have to do it without the usual help. Her NYPD contacts have dried up. Several officers were recently fired for making unauthorized queries to various criminal databases. Officers lost their jobs and most of their pensions. Every detective agency in the city was now complaining about the lack of such data, and many police officers were deprived of a good additional income. The city caught and fired only a few officers providing this service, but everyone got the message. Karen will have to wait until Hank returns from overseas this weekend to get the in-depth information. Hank was a retired agent of a renowned intelligence agency and was currently working for a private intelligence contractor. Hank's contacts abroad will be useful in finding Mr. B's Carson if David Carson has not yet returned to the country. Karen started her own queries right away, social media, newspaper articles, etc. When Hank returned on Friday, Karen's own research provided enough information to worry about. David Carson was wanted in connection with the murder of Joseph Benetti. Joseph Benetti's obituary did not mention his sister by name, Tori Carson, but a brother named John was mentioned. John Benetti was once accused of racketeering in the 90s, but was never convicted. A newspaper article covering the court case claimed that Benetti was rumored to be a member of the Gambino family. However, it appears that David Carson was a criminal, even if he wasn't convicted of a crime, and Karen needed the money. David Carson woke up as the sun began to shine through the southeast window. Sunlight wasn't the only thing coming into the room. The sounds of dozens of diesel engines filled his ears as fishing boats left the harbor. David stood up, relieved himself, and washed himself with a rag. Returning to the bedroom of his studio apartment, David looked at the sleeping beauty in his bed before turning on the coffee maker. He sat on the bed, reading a paperback book while he waited for the coffee to brew. When he heard the change in the blonde's breathing, he reached out his hand to rub her back. Lisa opened her eyes and a smile appeared on her face. "Can I smell the coffee?" "Yes. Would you like a cup?" "In a minute, maybe." David found himself in this sleepy fishing village 2 weeks after landing in Rome on that fateful day last year. His cost of living was minimal. He supplemented his $100,000 with odd jobs in the country, including being one of the few people in town who understood Windows. A number of businesses in the city and throughout the region needed computer support, and David provided it in cash or in exchange for services. Since no one ever asked him for a passport, David posed as a Canadian from Ontario and changed his name to John Davis. The name was close enough to David that he would always answer to it, even when drunk. After 6 months of self-imposed celibacy, watching his wife have sex with that bastard left his self-esteem in decline. David, now Davis, was approached one evening in a bar where mostly foreigners gathered by a pretty blonde. Lisa Walker was an Australian traveling through Europe after graduating from the University of Sydney, where she majored in physiology and spent 4 years on the university volleyball team. She spent her first year after graduation trying to make the Australian Olympic beach volleyball team. Having failed, Lisa ended up in Catalonia via Ibiza. Lisa had noticed the quiet, handsome man on 2 previous occasions and decided that that night she would introduce herself. Within 10 minutes, Lisa learned that his name was John Davis, he was Canadian, and she knew that she would have sex with him. It happened, and it was amazing. What Lisa didn't know was that Davis had spent the last couple of months without women, trying to understand what went wrong in his last sexual encounter, why Tori felt the need to cheat in their marriage. Whatever the reason, the next woman was guaranteed to be satisfied. And Lisa became the happy owner of all these studies. Everything was so good that she returned the next night for a repeat. 2 weeks into their relationship, Lisa couldn't stand it and asked a question. "Davis, I'll probably regret this for the rest of my life, but what's the deal with sex?" Davis was stunned. He thought he was doing everything right. What the hell? There was obvious confusion on his face, and Lisa knew she had to act quickly to prevent this from escalating into something more. "Okay, Davis, let me explain. She explained what the problem was. So he did, and 4 months later, Davis and Lisa were still dating, still faithful to each other, and all more enjoyed sex. Davis even considered asking Lisa to move in with him. It took Karen and Hank 2 weeks to find David Carson in Catalonia, but during these 2 weeks, Karen's conscience began to gnaw at her so much that she decided to return the money to Benetti. She called him and asked him to come to the office the next day. When Benetti arrived, Karen said that it was a useless matter. Carson might even be dead. She handed Benetti a check, minus her expenses, and said she couldn't handle it. Benetti took the check, but something about their exchange left Karen with an unpleasant feeling. 2 days later, Karen left the office to meet the children when they returned from school. Bill was out of the hospital and trying to be helpful around the house, but he had chemotherapy this morning, which means he'll be too sick to cook dinner. It was going to be another hard night after chemo. As Karen approached the subway station, a black SUV pulled up next to her, the back door opened, and John Benetti was looking at Karen, holding a gun in his hand. "Sit down." Karen was about to try to escape. Despite her prosthetic, she was moving better than most would have thought, but she saw something in the car that made her stop. Her daughter, Hannah, sat next to Benetti. Karen gave up and got into the car. "I know you found something. I think it's in your daughter's best interest that you give this to me. And if I give it up, what is the guarantee that you will let us go?" "No, but I will let you go if you give me what I want." "Test me and find out. Here we are at your office building. Go take what you found and I'll forget about all this. You have exactly 2 minutes before I leave." Karen couldn't risk it. She took the elevator up, trying to think of options. With so little time, she couldn't think of anything that wouldn't put Hannah in danger. To hell with it, she thought, if these bastards want to kill each other, I won't stop them at the risk of losing Hannah. Karen took the report and returned to the car. When Karen handed the report to Benetti, he opened it, read it quickly, and then turned to Karen. "You did it. 2 other detective agencies didn't find this bastard, even though it took them months. You did it in 2 weeks. Something else. If someone alerts Carson that we know where he is, Hannah will go for a second round. No warning, she'll just disappear one day. Do we understand each other?" Karen responded with a nod, holding Hannah's hand and getting out of the car. John Benetti just made the biggest mistake of his miserable life. 14 years before this incident, Karen Rowland was Karen Baker and worked in the intelligence division of the New York Police Department. Karen collaborated with agents from other intelligence agencies, including the man let's call Hank. There was a chemistry between them, not only a deep respect for each other's abilities, both mental and physical, but over the months of working together, they developed a romantic interest in each other. This affair led to a love affair that lasted several months, until both realized the difficulties of continuing this relationship. Both knew that this was temporary. Hank would soon leave for the Middle East, and their connection would never overgrown into more than friendship and great sex. Remained one problem that needed to be solved. Karen's diaphragm clearly failed its task. Karen was pregnant. The pregnancy was confirmed a week before Hank left for Afghanistan. They discussed it and decided that Hank would go ahead and send Karen the appropriate amount each month in child support. They'll discuss it again after Hank returns. Karen was pleased with this decision. She wanted this child and was glad that the child would have good genes. She understood the difficulties she would have to face as a single mother, but at least she was financially secure. Then something happened that changed everything. Karen was 7 months pregnant and was walking up the stairs of a subway station on her way to work when she tripped and almost fell down the stairs, but her fall was stopped by the person behind her. When she was lifted up, she found herself in the arms of the biggest man she had ever known. "Thanks, I think you just saved me from a very nasty fall." "Please, the lady with the child on board cannot be allowed to get hurt. Let me carry your briefcase. Where are you going?" Karen told him and introduced herself. "I'm Bill Rowland. Are you in a hurry? Can I invite you over for coffee or something?" Karen agreed to coffee, then dinner this weekend, then theater next week. and so on until she didn't even agree to let Bill be her partner according to Lamaze, explaining to my sister why change trainers. Karen realized that this was the one, but will he agree to raise a child who is not his? This is not how most men want to start a marriage, raising someone else's child. As their relationship became serious, Hannah was already 2 months old. Karen and Bill sat down to talk. Bill started with what worried him. Karen, I have 2 questions. First of all, how many children do you want? I was always hoping for 2 or 3. Why? Because I would like to have my own child. I needed to know if Hannah would be your only child. Bill, I love Hannah with all my heart, but I would like to have a child with my husband. Does that answer your first question? Bill smiled. This could be a serious obstacle to their future. Second question. What will happen when Hank returns? You have a child with him. Loyalty for me is undeniable. I am not going to share my wife with another man. Karen answered honestly. And for me, the vow to renounce all others is a vow I intend to keep, and I want my husband to keep as well. Bill's smile grew even wider. Now it's Karen's turn. Okay, you asked, and I answered your 2 questions. Now I have 2 of my own. First of all, Hank and I were talking about this recently. He won't be back for a long time, for a couple of years, and frankly, he's not a father figure. Can you raise Hannah as your own? No preference if we have 1 or 2 children of our own. Hank has already agreed to the adoption, although I think he wants to meet you first before it becomes official. I've thought about this a lot, Karen. Yes, if you want me to be her father, I want it. You know I already love this little girl. Now Karen smiled. One more thing I need to know. Hank said he would allow adoption, but would like to remain an uncle. Can you put up with the fact that my ex-lover will be here sometimes? Remember, I already gave you my word of fidelity. Bill thought about this for a moment before answering. Until you start using Hank as a replacement when we have problems. My brother Tony's wife had a friend who became her lover when she and Tony started having problems. I believe that if you have problems in your marriage, the husband and wife should discuss them, not some untested third party, or worse, someone who may have ulterior motives. Agree? Agree. With this decision, Bill took the ring out of his pocket. Karen, will you marry me? Karen was shocked, not expecting it so soon after the conversation, but she maintained her composure to say yes and give Bill the most romantic kiss of his life. So Bill became Dad and Hank became Uncle Hank. They would tell Hannah all the details much later. A year after the wedding, Anthony was born. Anthony was only 2 years old when Karen was shot, lost her leg, and left the police force on disability. When Karen founded her detective agency, she sometimes had to use Hank's knowledge and contacts. By this time, Bill and Hank had become good friends, almost like brothers. Both men understood each other's honesty. Hank trusted Bill to protect and love Hannah. Bill trusted Hank to respect his marriage to Karen. The morning after Hannah's kidnapping, Karen took the day off from work. She needed to talk to Bill, and she knew he wouldn't be strong enough until lunch. Bill knew something was going on and waited for it to open. He also knew that she was waiting until he showed himself to be strong before starting the conversation. They finished a nice lunch, and Bill did his best to look ready. He assumed that the conversation would again be about finances. Okay, Karen, what do we need to discuss? Karen began to smile. Oh my God, she thought, looking at him, knowing that he was still suffering inside from the cancer treatment. This man is so sensitive and knows me so well. How can I even do this? Lucky? Please, Lord, don't take him from us. Please let him overcome this disease. Karen decided to tell Bill the short version. Bill, I screwed up. Without knowing the circumstances, I entered into a contract with a man associated with the mafia. His name is John Benetti, and he asked me to find a man hiding in Europe. Hank and I found him. I decided not to give the mafia information because I was sure that he would kill this man. Benetti threatened Hannah yesterday, saying that if I don't give him information, Hannah will die. I gave him the report. He won't leave Hannah alone now that he has this. Maybe. What worries me is what if the hitman they send fails for some reason? Benetti will blame me and then. Karen could not finish. What do you want to do about it? Call the police. No, I want to tell Hank that that bastard threatened Hannah, but I didn't want to do it without your permission. You are her father. You and I have to make this decision together. And Hank can take care of this without drawing attention to us. I don't want Hannah, Anthony, or you to be in any danger from the mob. I'm pretty sure Hank can take care of this without leaving any trace leading to us. Then call Hank, let him come. Hank was at their house within 2 hours. Given the urgency of the call, his first thought was that it might be related to Bill's cancer. Hank was not a religious man, but he still asked any higher power to save the life of his good friend, who played a big role in raising his daughter into a wonderful young girl. Now, sitting in their living room, Hank was unprepared for the real reason he was called to the Rowland house. When Karen repeated Benetti's threats, Bill noticed something in Hank's eyes that almost scared him. This look was almost immediately replaced by an expression that can only be described as the look of gears working in your head. Hank got up from his chair and went to the kitchen, turned on the tap and drank straight from the tap, then returned to his place. I will need help with the computer, but I cannot use anyone from the agency or company. I already have a connection with John Benetti due to our initial inquiries. If there's another request, and then this Benetti disappears, it will lead straight to us. Even if we avoid an official investigation, you never know where the mafia might have connections. Remember that guy we helped a few years ago? He could send viruses and take over the computer. We don't need anything that dramatic, but we need his skills, and he's not tied to us. What was that guy's name? Jeffrey someone. You're talking about Jeffrey Parker, a guy from Philadelphia. I know how to contact him if his contact information hasn't changed. Hank replied, I'll call him from a phone that can't be traced to us and set up a meeting. From this moment on, you no longer have anything to do with it. Karen, give me Parker's number and I'll sort it out. 2 days later, Hank was sitting in a small restaurant in Philadelphia after his lunch break. There were only 2 waiters and only 1 table occupied, far enough away that they couldn't be overheard. Hank watched as Jeffrey Parker entered the restaurant, looked around, and headed to the table. Hank stood up to greet the big man. Hi, Jeff. Thank you for meeting me. Jeff laughed. How could I refuse? You and Karen helped save my marriage. Saved, so you and Emma have worked it out. Better than I could have hoped for. Emma gave birth to our first child last year, son Paul. Yes, things couldn't be better. How's Karen? Karen is fine, her kids are fine, but Bill, her husband, is fighting cancer. Oh, I'm sorry, how is he? The doctors give us hope, but right now we have a more pressing problem and we need your help. Hank explained the situation, what he planned to do to neutralize the threat to Hannah, and what he needed from Jeff to carry out the plan. Jeff leaned back as Hank finished. I can do the technical part, but I have one important question. What are the chances that this will come back to me? I don't want to put myself or my family in danger. Hank responded to Jeff as honestly as possible. Jeff, I am doing everything possible to distance this matter from Karen and her family. The same goes for you and your family. You will only be exposed in 2 cases. First, you will tell, or second, they will catch me, torture me, and I will tell. I don't think you're stupid enough to talk, and I can give you 1,000,000 to 1 that I won't spill the beans. But I know it goes beyond your comfort zones. All I can say is we need your help, and you will have a friend for life, a friend you can turn to if you ever need special help. Jeff smiled at Hank's choice of euphemism before extending his hand across the table. Give me the bastard's name and other details. This will take me 2 or 3 days. How will I contact you when everything is ready? Hank gave him a number to contact and instructions on what to say, shook Jeff's hand again, and sincerely thanked him for his help. 4,000 miles away, on the same day that Hank met with Jeff, John Davis' Lisa Walker was sitting in a small cafe enjoying lunch when she decided to tease him. Davis, don't look back now. but I think that guy at the counter has a crush on you. He looks at you all the time, tries to pretend he's not looking, but he definitely glances in your direction. I'm terribly jealous. Why do the hot guys in this town always want you and not me for bed?" David tried to look at the man without attracting attention. He instantly realized that this was not what Lisa thought. He saw the same guy yesterday at the market. This made him angry. He really liked Lisa and this city. Now both will become part of the past. Just as he started to relax and think he made old David Carson a ghost. "Hey, honey, let's get out of here and go to Barcelona for a couple of days. You go to your room and pack your bag. I'll pick you up in 2 hours, and we'll go to the train. What do you say?" "What do you think?" "Certainly." With these words, Lisa stood up to leave the cafe. Unfortunately, Lisa couldn't resist. When David was paying, she stuck her tongue out at the stranger as she passed him and said, "He's all mine." David thought he had lost track of the guy after sneaking out for half an hour, but apparently the guy had been following him longer than he thought, because when David walked into his apartment, the guy was there, in his room, waiting for him. "John Benetti wants you to know that this is from him." The stranger was holding a large knife in his hand. It was an exact replica of the knife David used to kill Joe Benetti. Neither John Benetti nor his mercenary knew that David Carson had been taking self-defense courses over the past year. David knew this day would come, and he decided long ago that he would not give up without a fight. The poor guy John sent to take out David didn't stand a chance. He killed this guy. David felt like a complete idiot. He knew that Lisa would be waiting for him to pick her up for a trip to Barcelona. Instead, he took a bag containing clothes and personal items and went to the bus station, needing to collect his cash in Rome before disappearing again. Latin America was promising. John Benetti was getting impatient. Sal called from Spain yesterday and said he found Carson. Sal kept an eye on Carson for a couple of days to make sure everything went smoothly, but he was confident he wouldn't need more. 4 days. John knew better than to rush Sal, but it was hard to resist telling him how to do his job. Wanting to relieve the tension, John decided to go to the Bronx and visit that establishment near the port. Before he could reach the car door, John felt the world plunge into darkness. It took John 4 hours to come to his senses. The stranger smiled. "Hi, John. No, you don't know me. I am Hannah's biological father. I understand that you threatened my little girl. No, don't shake your head. It's too late. Karen told me everything about the threats." Hank killed John. Miguel and Roberto Sanchez hated all Americans. The hatred grew because both boys spent 4 years with their mother in the U.S., picking apples in Washington and all kinds of produce in California before being detained by immigration officials and deported back to Mexico. It wasn't fair. During those 4 years, they stayed out of trouble, simply doing their jobs and caring for their mother, whose health continued to deteriorate. Miguel and Roberto knew a lot of illegal immigrants who stole or did worse, but their mother kept them in line, forbidding them from joining gangs. And then for all their efforts, they were rewarded by being thrown out of the country. Their mother's health deteriorated until she died last year. Miguel and Roberto knew that their mother would be alive today if she had stayed and received treatment in the North. With the departure of their mother, their hatred intensified. During 3 in the years after he left Catalonia, David Carson moved from city to city throughout Central America and Mexico. He was currently renting a room in a villa owned by a retired lawyer near a small coastal village southwest of Ensenada. His sources in the States told him that John Benetti had disappeared shortly after the failed assassination attempt. A year after this news, David was afraid to death, not staying in one city for more than a month. He assumed that John found out about the death of the mercenary and decided to kill David himself. He didn't know that only 4 people in the world knew that David had nothing to fear from John Benetti, and those 4 never even talked about it to each other. David was walking home after another evening at the local cantina. He was tired of running away, but most of all, he was tired of having no purpose in life other than getting drunk every night and flirting with the foreign women who passed through the village. David avoided the local girls, It was known among expats that the fastest way to get into trouble with local men was to flirt with their women, be it someone's sister, wife, or girlfriend. Sometimes it was difficult to live by these rules. Local ladies weren't stupid, immigrants had more money than local men, but David stuck to the rules. David's mind wandered as he tried to come up with a plan to return to the States. He missed his parents and siblings. He did not meet two nephews who were born after he left home. David was oblivious to his surroundings. Before he knew it, a man, or rather a boy, stood in front of him with a knife in his hand. David looked at the boy for a second before seeing the knife. "Hey, gringo, how much money do you have in your pockets?" Roberto Sanchez enjoyed the shock and momentary fear in the man's eyes. Roberto also liked to use the word gringo. It fit well with his feeling of internal hatred towards these foreign pigs. David didn't mind handing over a few pesos. He started pulling bills out of his front pocket while trying to think about what he would do if the situation went wrong. He was still practicing his moves and thought he could handle this guy if it came down to it. He looked at the knife in the boy's hand as he handed him the money. "And a wallet, gringo." "Damn it, I'll keep the wallet. You can take the money, but I'll leave my ID and stuff. You don't want to mess with me, boy." David was killed. Karen Rowland was surprised when her receptionist entered her office, accompanied by Tori Carson. "She insisted on seeing you immediately, boss. What do you order?" "Let her in, April. I will take care of it." April left the office, but left the door open as she returned to her desk. Karen invited Tori to sit in front of her table. "How can I help you, Mrs. Carson?" "First of all, let me apologize for my role in what happened. I should have apologized years ago, but I'm a coward. Being a coward is the reason I was in this from the beginning. I was too cowardly to say no when Joe Benetti picked me up at a bar and brought me to our house to have sex. And then I was too cowardly to refuse when John Benetti said I needed to convince you that I was looking for my runaway husband. I'm sure you know there was no child. John said that if I couldn't convince you, he would kill me for my role in Joe's death." Karen sat and listened to the woman's apologies. Part of her was tempted to punch the bitch in the face and break her nose again for her role in almost destroying Karen's family. The other part understood how some women became tools in the hands of strong, dominant men. Once again, Karen realized how lucky she was to have found a man who was a strong but caring partner. Yes, Bill was in remission. Could life be better? Karen pulled herself out of her thoughts. "Mrs. Sende Carson, you don't have to apologize to me. If something had happened to my daughter, I would probably be strangling you with my own hands right now. But all's well that ends well, and since my family is fine, you don't need to worry about us." "Tori," I looked at the detective and realized that I had not explained the true reason for my visit. "I didn't just come here to apologize, I came here to hire you." "Hire me for what?" "David was killed last month in Mexico. His body is awaiting identification. I may have been a bad wife to him, but he doesn't deserve to be buried in a pauper's grave there. He should be buried here in New York. Someone needs to go to Mexico to arrange for his body to be brought here and have a funeral. One more thing, David left here with thousands of dollars. My aunt told me that it was possible he might have some money left in the bank there. I want you to find them. When David left the country 5 years ago, he took almost everything we had. I don't make excuses for my mistakes, but in the end, most of this money was mine. How much will you charge to return what is left?" The transparency of this cold bitch disgusted Karen. "I think you're talking to the wrong person. How about you get up, get out of here, and never show your lousy face here again? Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to the